Hey, Matt.
Hey.
Is that a Bitcoin? Are you happy to see me?
Proud of yourself?
Yeah.
What's all that?
Oh my god, this is so boring.
That annoying Bitcoiner at the party that like corners you and talks to you.
You mean you?
Which is not what companies
Oh my god, I
that
have
are talking about blockchain
I'm so sorry. Are y'all
are
asleep
interested
too?
in.
Oh my god, snooze. Welcome to Talk Bitcoin to Me, a down and dirty podcast to get nitty gritty with the booty. A space for folks to learn about Bitcoin without feeling stupid. Please note, we are not financial advisors any more than your favorite murder podcasters or licensed detectives, so please don't mortgage your house on our advice. Thanks. Matt, I'm so excited. It's our first episode 0.
I'm also excited.
Why are we calling it episode 0?
Because actually in programming, you start everything with 0.
Okay, that's a good reason,
Like
even though
when you
you
number
just
things.
came up with it just on the fly.
That's true though.
Episode 0, where we introduce ourselves, introduce why we're here, what we hope to get and give out of the podcast, to let you guys know what to expect.
Kailey,
Yeah.
tell me a little about yourself.
My name's Kailey. I'm your wife. I'm a middle school math teacher. Why are you laughing?
That
I
look
am
you
your
gave
wife.
me, you were like, wife. It was like you were
Old ball and
possessed
chain.
for like just like a quarter second.
I'm a middle school teacher. I'm also an actor here in Portland. And I just found myself needing to become curious really quickly about your Bitcoin obsession a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's led to a very real baby understanding on my part, but a very real appreciation for what Bitcoin is and appreciation for the things that I've been learning.
Yeah.
Who are you?
I'm Matt, and I am an engineer by trade, but I really like learning things, and I guess that's how I got into Bitcoin.
Yeah, how did you find Bitcoin?
I found Bitcoin, 2017, right before all the crazy things that happened to Bitcoin's price that year happened.
None of us know what you're talking about. So anyway, moving on.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me to go read something about some other, what they call an altcoin, or
What friend?
not Bitcoin, Rocco.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And
I hate that guy.
And so I kind of went down the proverbial rabbit hole. Started thinking, like so many people do, like, oh, this is like how you make money. It's like buying stocks, but not. But ended up leading me to having a deeper understanding for what Bitcoin was. And then like how it worked was cool. Like the tech was cool to me. I was like, this is crazy. And then that led me down the money rabbit hole, and then economics, and then like how it all tied together, which led me down like philosophical rabbit holes and political rabbit holes and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I feel like it's like if someone asked me what has changed Matt most in the past decade, I would say, well, it was like 3 years ago, and it was Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin led you to this deeper understanding of, like you said, Bitcoin, sure, but then money, then economics, then philosophy, then like government. And I mean, this is the most active I've seen you in all of those areas.
Yeah, I guess in a way the whole world became even more fascinating to me than it kind of already was, like on a deeper level. And even if Bitcoin were to somehow die one day, I don't know how, but if it happened, I would be thankful that I discovered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the core of what Bitcoin is it's an experiment. And it's an experiment. I mean, it could all be a failed experiment. I don't know yet. We don't know yet.
I think the word that I gravitate towards about Bitcoin is that it's idealist. And I feel like it's an answer to a kind of a dystopian question, or maybe a utopian question.
I think you're right. I think it is idealist. I don't think it's ideal. I think it's still, it's man-made. It's not perfect, but nothing is.
Right. Our dollar isn't. And just to welcome listeners to episode 0, Bitcoin is a digital currency protected by cryptographics and encryption. So it's called a cryptocurrency, a digital money. So if you're completely new to the word Bitcoin, that's what it is. I just feel like every time I listen to one of your podcasts about Bitcoin, first of all, it never started at the beginning. It felt like. And it also feels like it's two dudes, a European and a Brit, or I don't know. Where are these people from that you make me listen to?
A Canadian.
There you go. And so like, again, like all these, and they're these kind of like middle-aged, extremely well-educated dudes. And I'm just like, when am I going to hear, someone who didn't have all that privilege talk about this?
Yeah.
And when am I going to hear you talk about it in terms that are meant for people who aren't economists?
Aren't a finance bro.
Yeah. And so I think that what we wanted to do is a podcast that's accessible to people and that it actually markets itself as beginner because it is truly beginner. What I started realizing is that I have privilege in being married to you and having access to your knowledge and having my own personal, what is Bitcoin? What is money? How is it different than other coins? Why is it not magic internet money? Explain these things to me. How does it relate to politics? What does that tweet mean? I have this, walking around and sleeping next to me. Mm-hmm. What about people who don't? And it just kind of made me panic that I felt like I was getting so much great knowledge and no one else is. And it's going to just further outpace some people who have access to knowledge and some people who don't. And I feel like this podcast is something we can do to maybe level that playing field. I also feel like whenever any episode markets itself as beginner, it doesn't really mean kindergarten. It means like college 101. And so automatically you lose all these listeners because you make them feel like they're not welcome and their questions aren't valid. And they are. And like, we're friends with tons of smart people who are so nervous to ask questions about the basics. What we're trying to celebrate is that like, those things shouldn't be shameful. That should be expected. So, forever ago on Reddit, Reddit, there was a hashtag or a room on Reddit called ELI5. Explain it like I'm 5. And actually, Matt, do you remember what you asked me about this the other day?
If it originated from The Office?
From the episode of The Office where they have the budget surplus and Michael has money to spend at the office and he calls Oscar, the accountant, in to ask him to break it down for him.
He's explain like I'm 5.
Yeah, and Oscar's like, this year you have a lemonade stand and you have $10 but you only spent $9. Next year your parents are only going to give you $9. So you got to spend that $1. And it's funny because it's supposed to make Michael look like he's really dumb. But actually what that episode did was explain to everyone watching what a budget surplus is.
That's brilliant.
Yes.
Explain like I'm 5 is a thing for a really good reason.
It's because if you understand something really well, you should be able to ELI 5. I want to also like give a shout out to people who have math trauma or have a lot of anxiety around money because maybe you at one point in your life mishandled it or were never taught how to handle it, which we weren't either.
Kind of crazy to think about actually how little education there is
on
how money works, how the economic system works. Why is that not taught more?
I know, and I don't want to over advertise that we know everything, but we're going to try to break things down so that if you feel a little nervous or if you're clamming up, you don't feel alone. Of course, we're going to say things that sometimes you might not understand. It might seem to us to be kindergarten, but you're like, wait, that's 5th grade. And at that point, we would want you to reach out with any questions. And like we've said before, when it comes to money, it just seems like people who have it know how to get more. And people who don't have it don't know how to get more.
Mm-hmm. Rich get richer.
And I feel like if we are going to disrupt that system, we need to be part of the solution of putting resources out there that equip people to empower their own financial literacy. Okay, so that's a good segue into going into talking about our different jobs on the podcast. So okay. I'll go first. My job is going to be to interrupt you a lot, to slow you down, make you explain things. Also try to put myself where I was really recently, where I didn't know anything, as opposed to right now where I know like 22% of thing. I want to really make sure that I keep you in kindergarten, even though you're trying often to go to like 5th grade or 12th grade or, level 200.
Yes, I'm going to try. My job is to try to not do that. I want listeners to walk away like understanding what Bitcoin is on an essential level.
Yeah.
And whether you just want to know about Bitcoin or whether you're thinking about buying Bitcoin, I think the best place to start is like with knowledge.
I've even thought about how we probably will need to like do episodes twice because we will often want to come back to redefining our podcast and redefining like what we're promising listeners.
Yeah. Plus I feel like we're going to like, I'll listen to it myself and be like, oh man, I should have said that, or I should have talked about that.
Or we're going to get new information. We're going to get new facts. We're going to update our opinions. So we're just going to commit to right here, right now, that being okay. Us being like, this is our new episode 3.
Extras.
So who should be listening to this podcast, Matt?
anyone that wants to learn the basics of how Bitcoin works, is interested in it, maybe from a financial reason, maybe from a super just techie, you want to nerd out with it reason, wants to know more about just money in general. I feel like that's really who could benefit the most from our podcast. It's not going to be for the person who's, trying to code their own Bitcoin stuff.
No.
No.
But that person could send our podcast to like their mom.
There you go. It's for that person's mom.
You might not be a person who believes in buying Bitcoin, but I promise you the technology that powers Bitcoin isn't going anywhere in our future. So you will be learning relevant things about your world, even if you don't subscribe to the idea of storing value in Bitcoin.
I think our core audience, though, are just people that are like, hey, what's this thing Bitcoin that I've heard about? Is it important? Like, the price keeps going up. So, like, what's that mean?
Yeah, I think it's for the person who's like, I keep hearing about Bitcoin, and it used to be okay that I didn't understand it, but now I'm like, should I understand this?
Like, is this important to me?
And also, I think it's for you if you still think that Bitcoin is a joke. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not a joke.
Yeah.
There's already legislation around it.
Whether or not you ultimately walk away after listening to this, just deciding you agree that it's important or not, at least you'll understand it better.
Okay, so I want you to give me your pitch for why they should care about Bitcoin. And I'm going to give my pitch for why they should care about Bitcoin. Let's rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay.
Best
2 out of 3?
No. One and done.
One and done. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Ooh,
you
I
win.
Go first. Scissors beats
Go.
paper.
Make it good.
Okay. My pitch for Bitcoin is that freedom and the idea of free money are very closely linked together. And I feel like that's often overlooked.
Wait. Freedom and the idea of free money are related and overlooked.
And
Oof, that's deep.
And I know that free money is not a familiar term to maybe a lot of people listening at this point.
Yeah, I was not aware that our money was not free.
Right. The idea here is that Bitcoin is, among other things, a money that cannot be controlled by any sovereign state or a group of sovereign states or influenced by corporations. What I mean is you can't change the monetary policy itself like you can with the dollar bill and other currencies controlled by governments. And so Bitcoin is a way out of that system, is a way to exit the control over your money, where it doesn't devalue, where it's predictable, the supply, everything about how it works. What we have now is crony capitalism that doesn't work. But a huge part of the reason that doesn't work is because the money doesn't work.
So would you say that on the heels of a year like 2020, where privileged people like me and you, white people, we become more concerned with social justice and equity and dismantling inequitable systems that are inequitable now but have historically been so, the only way we can have conversations about freedom is having holistic conversations, which always has to do with governing and therefore power, but also, of course, money.
Sure, exactly.
It's hard. I feel like I'm trying to listen with virgin ears and like try to understand what you're saying if I never heard this before.
Yeah.
And it's really nebulous because people are like, money is free. It's just a matter of who has it and who doesn't. And that's true. And that's also what we're trying to get out in front of with Bitcoin, right? We're trying to be like, if you don't have it, let's make that a decision that you made, a choice that you had, not just because you weren't informed.
Yeah, that's my basic pitch.
Freedom comes with free money.
Yeah, it's part of the solution.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's, by the way, sorry, one more thing on that Bitcoin is apolitical. So it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever, Bitcoin can be for you. It can.
And in fact, it is. I mean, Twitter space around Bitcoin is full of all different kinds of people who agree and disagree with their politics, but agree and disagree about Bitcoin.
There's actually a lot of interesting discussions around that, about how Bitcoin seemingly is very libertarian in ideas, but really it's apolitical. It is such a free market. The price just shows who's behind it.
And it's global. That's important to say. It's global.
It's global.
And we're going to get into all of these characteristics about Bitcoin, but I'm going to do my pitch about why you should care about Bitcoin. Why you should care about Bitcoin is, mine's a little bit more kindergarten than Matt's, which is great because that's why we're here. If you agree that we will always need money and that we're never going to live in an Orwellian dystopian future where we all live in glass houses and we don't trade anything for anything, like I'm just provided my clothes and my food and everything I'm ever going to have. if we don't believe that, or if we want to actively prevent that, we believe that we are always going to have to trade something for something that we want.
Right.
And we believe that we're probably never going to not need something like money. So we're never going to go back to a society where I'll trade you 2 sweaters for 4 bushels of apples. Probably never going to go back to that.
Probably never going to go back to that. The barter system.
Right. We are always going to need to know how much money was a bushel of apples and how much money was that sweater.
Mm-hmm.
So we agree that we're always going to need money. Do we also agree that money is a construct, that we made it up to solve a problem?
Pretty nuanced answer there, but sure.
An oversimplified answer is yes.
Okay.
Right?
It's almost debatable whether money was invented or discovered.
Right. It's like the same with math.
Money, which we'll get into, soon.
Yeah, episode 1.
Right. But money is a way for humankind to essentially interact, communicate value of things more efficiently.
Right. So if we assume that we will always need money, and how about this, Matt? Maybe money isn't a construct, but money is definitely man-made. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Then therefore, if it's man-made, it's probably imperfect. So the money that we currently have, if we can hold space for the fact that it could improve, which I think we could all agree, that A, we will always need it, and B, it's man-made. So C, it can improve.
I feel like it's almost like people know on some level whether they've thought about money for a long time or not at all. Somewhere in your head, it's like, it can be better than this somehow.
So if we agree that money can be better than the current system of money that we have, Bitcoin is the answer to that. Bitcoin is like, yes, money can be better. And in fact, I'm the best. And that's what I believe about the value proposition of Bitcoin. Why should you care about Bitcoin? If you believe that we need money, and if you believe that money can be better, then you should be interested in hearing about Bitcoin.
Boom.
We've had a lot of friends ask us how to invest in Bitcoin, and this seemed like a really good resource we could point them to, because there was this kind of revolving door that friends come in and out of in your life to ask you for advice and ask their questions of you because they trust you. And while that's something that brings you a lot of pleasure, you were having to start at the beginning at all these different points because everyone's at a different point in their journey.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot of like differentiation that I was watching you have to do.
Yeah, I had like this standard email, but it kept like growing in length and be like, well, he'd asked about that, so let me add this little.
And it was probably, I've never seen the email, but like, be honest, it's probably a little overwhelming, right, Matt?
To write that?
Yeah. No, to read that.
Oh, to read it? I'll tell you what's bad is reading an old one. Someone asked me about it a few years ago, and I don't even want to go back and read the email because I know it's just going to be way off.
I want you to read that. Matt's going to read that on a future episode. I want you to read it.
It's going to be so cringy.
It's like stock market advice. With every quarter we have new information, and so the advice that you might read 3 months ago might read really stupid because there's new facts. But I also want to be really careful and not equating Bitcoin to a stock.
Well, yeah, but I'd also add to that.
I think some facts wrong.
I think I got a lot of things wrong. I think I was like way into like crypto, which crypto is a term for like all the different types of digital currencies. Kind of realized that it was more just about Bitcoin when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I remember when you were talking about a lot of what are called altcoins or alternative coins, like alt music, altcoin.
Right.
Bitcoin's the rock and roll.
Basically, yeah. Everything that's not Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember kind of noticing that you were falling off talking to me about all these other coins.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of asked you about it, and you were like, I think I'm becoming a Bitcoin maximalist.
Mm-hmm. Which is a dirty term, or it used to be in this space. Like people, like it was coined by someone who used to be a Bitcoiner who's moved on to another project called Ethereum. Long story, but he basically
Wait a minute. No, not long story. Ethereum is an altcoin.
Sorry.
And Bitcoin is the rock and roll. So like Ethereum is a pearl. Bitcoin is gold.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've heard of a couple other coins like Litecoin or Ripple. Diamonds and sapphires. Or sapphires and...
Ripple's like a turd. It's like a total scam.
If all those 2 listeners that get what you're saying are laughing right now.
Actually, some of them are probably like,
no, Ripple's the best.
Which is fine. Just my opinion.
So anyway, I remember the analogy that you used was telling me that at some point long ago when gold was becoming a currency, it had other competitors. There are other fine metals, there are other fine gemstones, but there were properties of gold that made it rise to the top of that list.
Yeah.
And I
remember,
we're
gonna talk about all this.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that to me is why this podcast is about Bitcoin, not cryptocurrencies, because we believe that there's one that's going to rise to the top for viability, and that's Bitcoin.
Yeah, like if I was making a podcast like 1,000 years ago or whatever, whenever gold was becoming a thing, it would be like me making a podcast with you about gold instead of making a podcast with you about gold and silver and copper and sand
and oil and seashells and spices and silks.
Yes.
We would be like, it's going to be gold, guys. It's going to be gold.
Yeah, gold's the thing.
And then in 200 years from now, when they listen to this podcast and they're like, those idiots.
I know. Well,
they thought humans would be around.
Let's also point out, though, that we could be wrong, too.
Oh,
right?
I
think it's important for everyone to know that.
Please take us seriously in that you cannot take us seriously. Please don't go buy Bitcoin because Kailey and Matt told you to.
We're going to tell you a lot of things that we find important about Bitcoin. We're going to share what Bitcoin is on a fundamental level. We cannot predict the future.
I actually do want to clarify one thing, though. I want to make sure that people who already knew that Bitcoin is a digital currency, or that the technology or whatever they think it is behind Bitcoin has to do with digital currency. I think a lot of people confuse or equate Bitcoin with stock. And I just want to make sure that Bitcoin is far less like a stock in its properties and value and it's more similar to gold.
Yeah.
But its behavior right now, in that it has a market and it has ups and downs and it has valuation, that is similar to a stock's journey. But their intentions are very, very different.
Very different. I mean, anything you can throw a chart to compare the price
over time.
Over time to the supply of whatever you're looking at. The U.S. dollar is tracked on a market called the foreign exchange market. So you could put Bitcoin in that next to gold, next to the dollar.
Whoa, I'm going to slow you down. So you're telling me that the value of the dollar bill changes every day?
Yes. Because think about what value is. You're really just pricing one asset you're comparing it to another asset.
Oh my gosh, we don't have value unless we compare.
Yeah, you have to compare it to something. So like you can compare one currency to another currency.
But how would you value which currency was stronger?
Yeah, that has to do with how they're valuing their goods versus their own currency.
That's really complicated, and we're going to be getting into some more things. That's a
really nutshell version, but that's kind of
Well, what I just learned is that everything, I thought it was just stocks that traded at different values in each point in the day, but that's not true. And actually, I did know that because barrels of oil trade at different prices. So just because Bitcoin fluctuates in price doesn't mean that it's like a stock. It doesn't mean that you're investing in Bitcoin. There's no such thing as investing in Bitcoin because it's not a stock. What instead Matt would recommend you say is
holding.
You're holding value.
Holding Bitcoin, storing value in Bitcoin that's kind of the language I use for it.
Yeah, because when you say that you're investing in something, it means that you're investing in the company behind that thing.
Right.
And there is no company behind Bitcoin. Or it usually means that you're investing in a stock, which means that unless you sell it, you'll always have it and you'll receive dividends or payments for loaning your money to that company. But Bitcoin is not going to give you a dividend.
Right. So that's why some people say Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, which means like it's meant to be passed on to the next fool down the line that you sell to at a higher price. But I think when people say Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, they mean it's like this fake money that's on the internet that's not worth anything, that people just want to make a quick buck on, which means that someone else is gonna lose a quick buck on because they're gonna buy it and the price is gonna crash.
I completely thought Bitcoin was an illusion.
I thought that for years.
Yeah, that's why you didn't buy it when it was not worth a penny.
Yeah, that's why none of us did, probably.
Yeah, and so I completely understand what you're saying, that people think there's nothing behind it. And no, there's not a company behind it showing you its Christmas specials and its shiny branding. There is nothing behind Bitcoin, and we'll talk about the anonymity that powers Bitcoin. But there is an idea behind Bitcoin. There's a very powerful, undoable idea.
Mm-hmm. And that is a money that can't be messed with.
Which I didn't realize until you explained it to me. That doesn't exist now. So that kind of brings me to some things that I want to highlight about the importance of Bitcoin. because there are going to be properties of Bitcoin that we're going to go over that I think are what make it so valuable. But I'm more interested in the potential of Bitcoin from a perspective that is looking at broken systems all around us in government and economic theory, our global network, or the lack of a global unity, the fact that we are all subordinates of sovereign states, or we're citizens of governments, and not all governments are created equal. Our brothers and sisters around the world, depending on where they live, might be victims of extreme corruption. Not that we aren't ourselves here in the United States. So I want to make sure that I highlight one of the reasons why I think Bitcoin is worth my time and my listeners' time is to talk about what it could do for, sure, money and trade, but also like the future of justice.
There's a lot there, whole lot there. And hopefully we can touch on half of it.
Okay, Matt, so give us an idea of what we're going to be talking about in our episodes that are forthcoming.
Well, we know that we're going to call this episode 0. Episode 1, it's going to be focused on money. What is money, the definition of money, the history of money, and how that relates to the idea of Bitcoin. And that's going to kind of pave the way to talk about Bitcoin's value proposition. You know, it's different depending on who you talk to and in what country they live in. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin white paper, which was
how Bitcoin was announced.
Yeah, how, you know, the creation of Bitcoin.
The intersection between money and government.
We're going to talk about the debates around, you know, a lot of arguments against Bitcoin, like Bitcoin energy consumption, you know, the network's too slow for payments.
There are good arguments against Bitcoin, in our opinion, and then there are pretty slim arguments against Bitcoin. We're going to try to go through those. I
promise you that any argument you've heard about Bitcoin has the most outspoken proponents of Bitcoin.
Yeah, the smartest people that we know have addressed the arguments that you've heard.
Yeah, and it's a shame, but a lot of it is ignorance on the subject matter or not doing, you know, the appropriate amount of research.
And guys, don't worry, I'll press Matt on all this. I'll try to figure out where he's over fetishizing.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about other cryptocurrencies. And of course, we're obviously going to talk about how you can get started with Bitcoin if you feel like that's the right move financially for yourself.
Yep.
Oh,
here we go.
What's the dumbest question of the week? This is the segment, a very popular segment that we do where we talk about the dumbest question we've heard this week.
Okay.
So, Matt, the dumbest question I heard this week. Guys, it's not dumb, okay? Have you picked up on our tone yet? Can I buy less than a full Bitcoin?
Oh, yes. You can buy less than a full Bitcoin. That's an easy one. You know how $1 is made up of 100 cents?
Mm-hmm.
So one Bitcoin is made up of 100 million units called Satoshis.
Or sats.
Or sats, for short.
So cents are to dollars, as sats are to Bitcoin.
So, Kailey.
Yes.
If I have 10 million sats,
yes.
How much Bitcoin do I have?
You have 0.1 Bitcoin. 0.01.
Oh, wait. You're right.
Oh my god.
0.1.
Just trolled me.
That's how it's going to be.
You have a tenth of a Bitcoin because 10 million is a tenth of 100 million, which would be a whole Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Did your insides just freeze up because we just did math? You are not alone. I just had to do some serious thinking, and I just had to relax myself by thinking I could edit out my wrong answer. Okay, you guys? And then Matt messed up policing me. So please don't feel like...
a lot of that.
Yes, please don't be like, oh my god, I'm having a hard time with remembering that first decimal point after the 1, like the first decimal is called a tenth. It's okay that you don't remember that. And now a word from our sponsors. Guys, we don't have any sponsors.
You want to come on the show and be a sponsor?
We'd love to sell your homemade bath bombs.
Yeah. Or
rings
like
that you made out of old skateboards.
Astrology predictions.
Gosh, we're seeing some really great Portland vendors, so hit us up. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk Bitcoin to Me. You can find any information and links that we mentioned in the show notes below. Keep an eye out for our next podcast by following us on Twitter at
Talk Bitty to Me.
Oh my god, that's terrifying. Why are you trying to sound like a robot?
Make it sound like it's like a hip hop song.
No.
Talk Bitty to Me.
Please stop.